Hey everybody, this is Orion saying from the Detroit Free Press here with Reiner and Shawn. We're here in the aftermath of Michigan's 44-10 win over Michigan State. To me, when I'm looking at this game, this seems like a monumental step for Michigan in terms of this rivalry and taking control back, and also for the offense, which looked really good today.
It did against the defense, though, that just gave up 500 passing or 450 passing yards a week ago against Illinois. So keep that in mind. It's a wounded team. But I'm with you. It's certainly big. They've won, 3 out of the last 4 now. It's certainly the last 2. First time they've won 2 in a row since 2007. Is that right?
Yeah, 2006 and 2007.
And it's just the talent difference is what stood out today. I mean, it's as big as it's been in a decade. And, I was walking up the stadium today. Nobody was worried out there. You're walking through all that maize and blue, and it felt like it did 15 years ago. They're walking up here. They're drinking. They're having fun because they know what's about to happen. Maybe not 44-10, but they know what's about to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was kind of a tone-setting game for the rest of for the foreseeable future with Michigan. I think they, again, established themselves as a dominant program in the state, and it also was, again, like you said, a very encouraging thing from an offensive standpoint to see them execute at that level. Josh Gaddis's speed and space offense looked like it was finally kind of came to, full blossom. Getting the ball to the edges and having these one-on-one matchups with the receivers, in which they were able to use their talents to their best advantage. And so I think overall it was a very encouraging game for Michigan, not only as it relates to the series, but the offense going forward.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about that a little bit, the offense. Didn't it look like what you anticipated going into the season? I mean, all those bubble screens they were throwing to Ronnie Bell, Donovan Peoples-Jones, they hit Nico Collins, Tariq Black even got in with a jump ball. I mean, they were giving those guys a chance to make plays, and it looked really easy. I mean, those bubble screens, they had so many yards to run. I mean, it just looked really easy out there.
They did. They were running outs and the slot with Bell all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those guys were all wide open. The only one who wasn't often was Nico Collins, but he was so big and. As you say, defensive backs are so small,
and they bracketed him too.
Exactly, and they started throwing it up and letting him make plays. I think he had a touchdown late in the end zone, kind of looking back at the sun to do that. But it reminded me of the first game of the year a little bit, where they were running down the field freely to some degree.
Yeah,
and then they kind of got pretzeled up. And I realized that that's not the same level of competition. But
I will say the one difference between that game and what we're seeing now is that early in the year they were threatening the bubble screens with that orbit motion. Motion that guy across, and they weren't really throwing it. They would just do that and sort of just threaten the defense.
Sure. And
I guess at some point the defense was just like, well, you're not going to throw that, so we're not going to really pay attention to it.
Right.
But now Michigan's actually doing it, and it started in the second half of that Penn State game. Michigan started making its comeback with those bubble screens against Penn State. They started getting those chunk plays. And now we look 4 weeks later, I mean, it's still there. It's even more present in the offense, and it's adding another element that teams have to account for. And it's opening up the field, too.
Well, and I just think the game plan was more coherent. I mean, they cleared back a lot of the, weird elements that they were kind of thrusting forward in the Middle Tennessee State game, for instance. And, after that, I think, they got together, said, we really need to cut some of this down and, get it to so that we can execute these plays really well. And I think a lot of those plays kind of had layers to them where, you would show one element of that play, and then there would be another element that they would bring forth a little bit later in the game. And I think that's what you saw. These plays all kind of had overlaps there. And so the execution was really good because, again, conceptually, it was very similar to what they were doing throughout the game.
The reason it reminded me of the first game, I think you mentioned Middle Tennessee State, is because the wideouts going deep to some degree on the edges, and it's open up the middle for the tight ends, which we saw today. It was the 3rd and 20, and it wasn't Eubanks, it was
McCune, yeah.
Who was so, really there was no 5-6 yards, there was somebody who was right around him. And we saw that again and again. They're being aggressive that way. What's interesting to me, though, is that a couple of weeks ago against Notre Dame, of course, it was raining. They line up and they just mash them, and they still did a little bit of that today too. But they have figured it out. To your point, Reiner, that some of the Harbaugh stuff from a year ago and the last few years, and some of the Gaddis stuff now, and it's humming.
Yeah. I think we can look ahead now. They have 2 games left. They're at Indiana next week, and Indiana has played them tough the past 4 seasons. In 2015, they took them to double overtime there. 2017 took them to overtime. So it's a tough game. Indiana's good this year, and then you have the final game of the season against Ohio State here. when we look at it right now, Michigan's sort of out of the Big Ten race. They're out of the playoff
Mm.
race completely.
Right.
But with the way they're playing, they can still have a nice finish to the season. It's just going to be really hard for them to achieve those lofty preseason goals that they had with the Big Ten title out of the picture and the playoff out of the picture. But if they keep ascending,
Right.
you know, they can beat Indiana. They can maybe have a close game. Maybe even, I don't know.
Mhm.
Ohio State's really good this
Yeah,
year, but
yeah.
You get the point. It's like
Right.
although things maybe haven't played out the way they wanted it to, the way they're playing right now, they can still have that nice end to the season.
Well, at the very least, the doubt is removed from, early on about what this offense is, I guess, with Wisconsin. I mean, there is some progress being made, and you can point to tangible progress that it's going to be very helpful going into next season. I mean, and, having that building block established and foundation established. And so I think that that's good, and something that they can point forward to. And, I think that in general, Michigan's set up, well for possibly next year. If they can't achieve the goals that they had set out to achieve this year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the big one's still beating the Buckeyes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think they'll play with them. I really do. We'll
Yeah,
see a little bit when Penn
yeah.
State plays Ohio State. That'll tell us a little bit more.
I think Ohio State will blow them out.
They might.
Yeah.
They might.
I don't
But
think Penn State's-
look, I was at the Michigan State Ohio State game, and Michigan State stayed with them for half. Now, admittedly, they were a little bit more confident a month ago, or 5 weeks ago, or however long ago that was. God, that was
Yeah.
forever ago.
Yeah.
State. That was the last time State
while
had
ago.
won
But
forever.
pass protection is going to be so huge in that Ohio State
Yeah.
game. I mean, that's where it all comes down to. If they can pass protect, Shea,
Yeah.
and he gets thrown off his mark, I mean, all bets are off in that game. And I think it all comes down to that. Because,
Oh.
I mean, when Shea's got protection and develops that rhythm early on,
It really
he's pretty,
helps.
he's pretty,
Yeah,
he's pretty
it really
dynamic.
helps.
Especially when
Yeah.
he gets outside the pocket a little
Sure.
bit, which
Yeah.
is where I think he likes to
Yeah.
operate the most.
Mhm.
So,
Well, we'll cross that bridge as we get closer. But for Shawn and Reiner, this is Orion, and thanks for following along. We'll have more stories up at freepress.com. Thank you.